What up, friends? This is for the S-Man downstairs, and today we're going to be reviewing Ghost's newest album, Impera. This is the 5th album overall by the satanic and extravagant metal and rock act, Ghost. It's almost surprising how popular these guys are despite their concept. However, when you really look at it, it shouldn't come as a surprise. The band is just pure over-the-top fun, from their intricate and elaborate stage displays to the Scooby-Doo rock on their records. It's pretty easy to see why I and many others have such a fun time with them. While some records are better than others, Melior probably being the best of the bunch, the newer albums also keep the hamminess and commitment to the themes, and are still pretty fun despite having a lighter sound. This new album by the band has been kind of described as their Black Album, and I can kind of understand that because, like the Black Album, this one's going to be divisive. This is Ghost at their poppiest, and often at their slowest as well. While many not be a fan of this sound, I think their honing of their satanic cheesiness and commitment to the bit kind of makes these songs work. They fully embrace this side of themselves, and yes, it isn't their best project, but it is fun. The acoustic metal power ballad, Imperium, is a pretty good way to start the record. It doesn't necessarily stand out, but it does have a triumphant yet somber sound that sets the mood of the project. Kaiserion is a pretty great first main track to the record. It takes their hamminess up to the next level with a glam rock and arena rock sound that just fits the driving beat on this thing. The main riff is catchy and compelling, and the vocals have a fun flow to them that rounds out the instrumental. The punchy bass also really helps fill out the pre-chorus of the track too. This is a song that gets you pumped up for the rest of the record, and I like the lyrical angle of this as well, referencing an ancient philosopher, Hypatia, who was killed by early Christians for going against them and for being a pagan. It's a smart comparison because many of these extreme views and ideologies still lead to tragedies today, like shootings, the rejection of the LGBT community, book burnings, you name it. Next up we got Spillways, and I love the piano intro on this one. It gives it an identity compared to the rest of the record. It is still very over the top with its harmonious and soaring background vocals, but it takes it in stride. That chorus is so simple yet so engaging, and it's pretty funny to see a more dance rock oriented tune from a satanic band like this. The slick guitar solo adds to the energy and also fits the lyrical themes of essentially letting loose to rid yourself of the darkness and fear that's inside of you. Now, Call Me Little Sunshine is a classic Metallica Black Album inspired ballad. Chilling guitar tones, gritty bass, the church bells, it has it all. It's also an interesting combination of darkness, somberness, and hope as well. The Call Me Little Sunshine line is pretty funny and corny, but I also think it fits the sort of cheesiness of the record and of their image, is because they don't take themselves too seriously, but they still take themselves seriously enough. This is good though, as the lyrics are actually kind of endearing, as we're finding solace in Lucifer because he understands being an outcast and feeling misunderstood. I'm also really digging the classic Dracula-esque organ at the end too. Hunter's Moon is one that I'm a little less keen on. I like the dark yet propelling beat, and the vocals have some fun cadence to them, but I find the chorus to be pretty weak. It kills the pacing a bit with how abruptly it stops, and I find the instrumental to be a little less interesting compared to the verses. The song has some guitar chugging that feels a bit played out at this point, and while the Halloween and Michael Myers-esque lyrics are pretty quirky and interesting, they feel out of place thematically on the record. It's still catchy, it's still fun, but it could have been better. However, I am really digging Watcher in the Sky. It's got that classic hard rock guitar and drumming, but with a bit of a modern twist. I love how dramatic the vocals are on this track, and the omnipresent guitar is a very fitting backdrop. The subtle synth elements during the pre-chorus are pretty interesting and add a spacey touch to the instrumental, and these also fit the lyrics about a hypothetical situation of what if we use science to find God and, find deities instead of just using it to stick to Earth. It's an interesting topic about regression, but maybe an alternate path that humanity could have taken. Twenties is definitely my least favorite song on the project. There is such a thing as too corny, even for Ghost, and I think they crossed that line. Like, seriously, listen up, you motherfuckers, those Ivy League dopes, they want to mock us, and we'll be smooching at the feet of Darula, we'll be grinding in a pile of moolah? What are these lyrics on this track, man? I do like the Broadway-inspired instrumental with the bombastic horns and dramatic background vocals, but there's a way to do it without being kinda cringe. Tobias's vocals are also kind of awkward too, not really fitting the instrumental and also not carrying the weight I think he wanted them to carry. It does not come off as aggressive as he wanted it to. I'm sorry. Darkness at the Heart of My Love is another interesting ballad, having an acoustic sounding intro and even some like modern pop elements here and there before going into your more standard power ballad territory. I think the first chorus is a little weak with its snap beat, but the instrumental largely gets better from here on out. The vocals are chill and have a good deal of emotion. I think it's just interesting to hear Ghost do a track like this, to be honest. That chorus is definitely catchy, and I like how bombastic it feels without feeling cluttered or samey. There's some pretty smooth guitar solos here too, and the lyrics depicting a dark love and finding love in said darkness is such a Ghost take on the classic love-inspired pop tune. I'm also really digging the choir-like background vocals near the back end of this track as well. Griftwood, though, is a bit too standard for my liking. It's a decently put together song, however nothing really stands out on this one compared to some of the other songs on the record. It feels like a sort of Journey-esque anthemic pop rock tune, but it doesn't have a lot of that Ghost energy to it. The charm just really isn't there. It's not anthemic enough to be interesting, but it's also not even the best example of the sound it's trying to emulate. Granted, it is very catchy, and I do like the bass emphasis on a lot of the parts on here, but it's just not very memorable. I do like the lyrical topics of pastors and preachers using their power and influence to further their own gain, and the piano segments near the end are pretty nice, however that's about it. It feels like the most by-the-book song on here, ironically. Respite on the Spiralfields is the final ballad to close the album out. It's also a pretty good one, being an analysis on Jack the Ripper and the influence of people that inflict pain and suffering on others. The melancholic guitar has an interesting effect that showcases the fear that these types of people bring, but also how these evil people can often disappear without a trace despite how notorious they were. It's oddly enough a sort of hopeful tune that this pain and suffering won't last forever, there's always a way to get rid of it, and the guitar solo I think effectively captures this as well. The track also has a pretty nice progression that propels the song and narrative forward and also leads to the culmination of the album pretty nicely. Overall, while this is definitely one of Ghost's weakest albums, it's still pretty fun. I think it works because it's so cheesy that it kind of circles back into being self-aware, for the most part. It's a love letter to 80s glam rock and hard rock, and while it can occasionally sound kind of derivative, I feel like it's injected with enough Ghost charm to be pretty interesting and engaging. The lyrics tended to be pretty good on the project, though not very consistent with their references, if that makes sense. I would have preferred it if they honed in on an era of sorts, like they did with Hypatia on Kaiserion. You can tell this was a big production, and I appreciate what the band was going for, but I wish it sounded more like an album rather than a collection of singles. Only 3 tracks were released as singles, but it feels like they were created with that explicit purpose. It's also a pretty short album as well, only having 12 tracks, 3 of them being intermissions, and I just feel like nothing really came together too seamlessly. Overall, I'm feeling a strong 6. It's a fun album, but that's kind of all it is. Of course, we do have to talk about album covers on this show, and this is just your standard classic Ghost album cover. It's very grotesque and intricate. It has just tons of elements just omnipresent and oppressive all over this cover. It's a bit more mechanical. I'm wondering if that's kind of a reference to how this album came together. Maybe it was a bit more structured than their normal works. But I think the color combination is pretty good. It has its focus on like yellows and blues and grays, which I think is pretty neat. I'm never usually a fan of these metal covers that have all of this sort of imagery on it. I think it just ends up being kind of cluttered. But you know, for the group, they're over the top. This is kind of their thing. So I think for them it works. It's just not really my taste. But that is all I have to say on this newest album by Ghost. What did you guys think? Do you actually like this more mainstream sound, maybe a little bit easier to get into? Or are you kind of missing their heavier moments that they've had on their previous albums? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell if you're a spooky ghost, and until the next one, farewell.